Уже по нефтегавани бобры плавают.
This is my video update from Limassol, Cyprus on this Tuesday morning, June 6th. Let's talk about some news. And the big breaking story that we have to talk about is the destruction. Interesting bench. Is the destruction of the Novaya Kakhovka Dam in the Kherson region. So this is kind of breaking news. I'm going to give you all the information that I have at this moment, the morning of Tuesday, Cyprus time, June 6th. But I am sure as this video goes up and we get more information, we will have a better understanding as to what happened in this area of Kherson. And the first thing that I want to say, the first fact that I think we should all understand, which I think is important, and a lot of collective West media is not mentioning it, is that the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power station, the dam, was under the control of Russia. So in much the same way that the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is under the control of Russia, in much the same way that the gas flowing through the Nord Stream pipeline was under the control of Russia, the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power station, the Novaya Kakhovka Dam, is under the control of Russia. So I think this is an important point that we all have to consider as we try to figure out what happened here in this region in Kherson. Now, the New York Times, they ran an article on May the 17th, 2023, with the title, "Russian-Controlled Dam Risks Flooding in Southern Ukraine." The development is a dramatic turnabout after the reservoir had reached a historic low. The dam, which lies along the front line, has been a point of tension throughout the war. This article was published on May 17th, 2023 via the New York Times. Basically, in this article, they talk about how under the control of Ukraine, the reservoir was very low in water, and under the control of the Russians, the reservoir was very, very high, to the point where, according to various experts that the New York Times interviewed, the water was kind of overflowing from the dam. One expert described it as an overflowing bucket, and the New York Times, they talk about the risks that this overflow may cause to the region. The last paragraph in this New York Times article reads, "The dam, which lies along the front line, has been a point of tension throughout the war in August. A Ukrainian artillery strike targeted a bridge along the dam, though the dam avoided sustaining any damage." Okay? That is how the New York Times describes Ukraine artillery strikes directed at the dam. Now listen to the words they use when describing Russian military action around the dam. Then in November, Russian forces deliberately destroyed part of a road directly above the dam's gates, carrying out an explosion dangerously close to vital dam infrastructure. So when the Russians, when they destroy a part of a road close to the dam, the New York Times uses the words deliberately destroyed the road, and the explosion was dangerously close when describing artillery strikes directed at the dam and targeting a bridge at this dam. The New York Times, they don't use the words deliberately, they don't use the words dangerous, none of that. The artillery strikes from Ukraine, they were not deliberate. But Russia destroying a part of a road Well, that's deliberate and that's dangerous. But the New York Times, in this article from May the 17th, 2023, they state that this dam is under Russian control. Russian-controlled dam risks flooding in southern Ukraine. Now, what happened? What happened yesterday evening? According to the mayor of Nova Kakhovka, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, a number of numerous strikes were carried out on the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power station, which destroyed the sonars. This is what the common people call valves. As a result, water from the Kakhovka reservoir began to uncontrollably be discharged downstream. That is a statement from Mayor Vladimir Leontiev. Apparently, early reports are that the upper part of the dam has been destroyed, or a part of the upper part of the dam has been destroyed, but the reservoir dam foundation, according to early reports, is still intact. Those are early reports that we're getting, though I have seen other reports saying that the top portions of the dam are starting to collapse throughout. So we'll see as the day goes along what kind of damage is occurring at this dam. There is currently no threat to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Once again, these are early reports that I'm getting in. The facilities are provided with backup measures for water supply in case of such disasters. So a lot of the talk about the destruction of this dam posing a significant risk to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. At this moment, it looks like everything is stable at the ZNPP. Keep in mind that things can change as the day goes along. So I'm just giving you information that I'm getting right now, early morning Cyprus time, which is the same time as Ukraine, as to what is happening in this area with this situation around the destruction of this dam. Ukraine President Zelensky, he has already accused Russia of blowing up the power plant, and he has urgently convened the Council for National Security. So the Ukraine president, right away, he is blaming Russia. I actually read a statement like 5 minutes before I started recording this video that Michel from the EU, the second in charge of the European Union, next to Van der Crazy, he has also come out and he has blamed this on Russia. Most of the collective West media, for example, The Guardian, they are already blaming this on Russia as well. So the president of Ukraine has come out right away and blamed this on Russia. They are saying that this is a Russia terrorist act. And I think Zelensky said something like, this is proof once again that the entire world needs to remove Russia from Ukraine territory, and they need to brand Russia a terrorist state, something like that. He came out with a statement along the lines of Russia is a terrorist state, and this is more evidence that Russia needs to be expelled from Ukrainian lands, and Russia needs to be branded a global terrorist state. So Zelensky was quick to blame Russia. At this moment, I have not seen any statements from the Russian government. They have not said that this is the Ukraine military or terrorist act or saboteurs or anything like that. Though I believe the mayor of the Kherson region, the Russian mayor of this region, he did come out and say that he believes that Ukraine military was behind this. But as far as the Kremlin goes, we have not, at this moment at least, we have not had any official statement, or at least they have not said who is to blame for this attack. So there is a lot of fog of war right now as to who was behind this explosion and even how it was done. From the Ukraine side, on a military level, the Ukraine argues that Russia benefits by flooding the area around Kherson and preventing a Ukraine military advance from the west bank of Kherson from the west to the east. So the Ukraine analysts are arguing that Russia was behind this because this was the easiest way, the best way, I don't want to say the easiest way, the best way to prevent a Ukraine advance over to the other side of the river to where the Russians are in Kherson. That is the Ukraine argument. The Russian argument, they are saying that the destruction of this dam benefits the Ukraine military because this will make it easier for Ukrainian troops to cross the Dnipro later this summer upstream. And from a humanitarian point of view, this destruction of the dam causes difficulty for the water supply to Crimea, to the public of Crimea. So that's the argument that the Russian analysts are making. Basically, the military argument is that upstream in the Zaporozhye area, as time goes by, it's going to make it easier for the Ukraine forces to pass over to where the Russian forces are, to where the Russian fortifications are located. And of course, on the humanitarian side of things, blowing up the dam makes it difficult to supply water to Crimea. From the Ukraine side of things, they make the argument that on a humanitarian level, they have to evacuate residents in this Kherson region, the west of the dam, which is going to now be flooded. They have to evacuate residents from that area. So that's pretty much the argument that both sides are leveling against each other as to who benefits most from the destruction of this dam. Either way, from this area where the flooding is now occurring, Ukraine cannot cross over, and the Russian military cannot cross over either. So while the Ukraine side, they're saying that Russia benefits by preventing us from crossing over Kherson, well, the same can be said about the Russian military. The Russian military now cannot advance to the other side of Kherson either. Keep in mind that Surovikin, way back in November 2022, Surovikin feared this exact thing happening, and that is why he moved the Russian military, which was located throughout the region of Kherson, including on the west of the river. That is why he moved the Russian military to the east of the river, because he was worried that Ukraine would eventually hit this dam, cause flooding of the dam, and then it would isolate the Russian troops on the west of the Kherson River. So Surovikin has been proven right in his decision to move the Russian military from the west to the east. Now, I've also gotten reports about the water supply to Crimea that it is at risk, but it's just a portion of the water supply to Crimea. It's the flooding is not going to pose a complete risk to the water supply to Crimea. It's just going to be a part of the supply. The water will not be available to enter the North Crimean Canal in volume in which it was supplied. So this is going to be a problem for residents of Crimea, though it's not going to pose a full risk to the water supply for the residents of Crimea. Now, here's an article from the Moscow Times from November 2022, once again, when everything was happening in Kherson and when Surovikin was preparing to remove the Russian military from the west to the east in November 2022, and right before the great Kherson counteroffensive, which saw the Ukraine military take over the territory that Surovikin left open and available to the Ukraine military. Right around this time, in November of 2022, the Moscow Times, which is super anti-Russian, super anti-Putin, they posted an article about what is happening in Kherson. And they said that terrain levels mean flooding would likely be worse on the Russian-held bank of the Dnipro, making a detonation of explosives on the dam an unlikely move for Moscow. So there was a lot of talk back in November that as Surovikin was moving the Russian troops, the Russian military from the west to the east, fearing the dam being targeted and blown up, there was a lot of collective West propaganda saying that the Russians were going to purposefully, deliberately blow up the dam. And so the Moscow Times, they started to interview some experts, and they came up with the conclusion that it would not be in Russia's favor to blow up the dam as they were moving from west to east. Destroying the dam would mean Russia essentially blowing its own foot off, military analyst Michael Kaufman said on the War on the Rocks podcast. It would flood the Russian-controlled part of Kherson region much more than the western part that Ukrainians are likely to liberate. That's a direct quote from this analyst. And the secondary effects of blowing the dam could be just as severe for Russia. Lowering the river level behind the dam threatens both water supplies to Moscow-annexed Crimea and risks cutting off access to cooling water for the Russian-controlled nuclear power plant in Ukraine's Zaporozhye region. Blowing the dam would also provoke international outcry, another analyst told the Moscow Times. This was an article that the Moscow Times published in November of 2022. Basically, what the Moscow Times was saying, citing experts and analysts, was that as Russia was moving their soldiers from west to east, fearing that the dam would eventually flood because Ukraine would hit the dam, the analysts basically say that, look, any of the collective West talk about Russia blowing up the dam is nonsense, because blowing up the dam would actually hurt the Russian military more than it would help the Russian military. And even on a PR optics level, it does not benefit Russia. It puts at risk the water supply to Crimea. It puts at risk the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. On a global level, this would be denounced as a terrorist act, and I actually believe that blowing up the dam is indeed does indeed go against the Geneva Conventions for War. So that is a fact. And the argument from this military expert is that the flooding would actually be worse on the east side of the river than on the west side. So it would be more of a risk to the Russian troops than to the Ukraine forces that, according to this analyst, would eventually take over the west side of the Kherson region. So that is an article from the Moscow Times in November 2022. Now, Zelensky met with British Foreign Minister Cleverly yesterday. This was an unannounced visit from the British Foreign Secretary, a secret visit from the British Foreign Secretary, and it is being reported on today that Zelensky met with Cleverly yesterday, and we now have the destruction of this dam. Coincidence? Perhaps. Maybe not. Maybe not. So to wrap things up, on this very, very important story. The collective West, Zelensky, I'm positive, more collective West presidents, prime ministers, and leaders, as well as collective West media, they are going to blame Russia for this. The narrative that they are going to feed us is that Russia blew up the hydroelectric power plant that they control. And the reason they blew it up is because they wanted to prevent the great Ukraine offensive in the Kherson region. They wanted to stop the Ukraine military from crossing over the river from west to east, and so they blew up the Kakhovka Dam. That is the narrative that we are going to be fed. In much the same way that Russia attacked its own Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, in much the same way that they were trying to convince us that Putin blew up his own Nord Stream pipeline, they are now going to tell us that Russia destroyed the dam that they control. And they destroyed this dam knowing that this would cause problems for Russian citizens in Crimea and that this would cause problems for the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. But because the Russian military wanted to prevent, at least in this direction, the Ukraine military from advancing in Kherson in their big counter-offensive that offends me and offends you, the Russians decided to blow up the dam. That is the narrative that we're going to be fed from the collective West. I just want everyone to know that. Who blew up this dam? I don't know. I have no idea. I find it very, very alarming that right away, Zelensky blames Russia. Right away, the EU, one of the EU head honchos blames Russia. Right away, collective West media blames Russia without any investigation, without waiting a day or two. Right away, they are blaming Russia for blowing up the own dam that they control. That, to me, is very alarming. Keep in mind that Ukraine did launch their big counter-offensive yesterday that they've been talking up for the past 3 months, and it did not go well at all. It was a big failure, the launch of their big, much anticipated counteroffensive. So they fail across the board in launching their hyped up big counteroffensive. And what happens a day after the counteroffensive is launched and fails? You get the Kakhovka Dam being blown apart. And the foreign minister of the UK just happened to be in Kiev a day before this happened. Coincidence? I don't know. But we all know who was behind Nord Stream, don't we? Anyway, we're going to have to wait and see as the day progresses. Maybe give this a couple of days so we can get some more information. I'm waiting for a statement from the Russian government as well. Maybe as the day goes along, we'll get some statement from the Russian government. And let's wait and see what exactly happened, how this dam was blown up, and maybe we'll get some more insight as to who was behind the blowing up of the Novaya Kakhovka Dam. So let's now talk a little bit about the big Ukraine counteroffensive that happened the other day. The New York Times, they have an article with the title, "As Ukrainian Attacks Surge, U.S. Officials See Signs of a Counteroffensive." Kiev has not formally announced the start of operations, but Russia said that major Ukrainian attacks had begun in the Donetsk region and that it had repelled the assaults and inflicted casualties. I said this in my video yesterday. if the attacks had gone well, then Zelensky would have come out and said, the big counteroffensive has started. The big counteroffensive, it start. It is very successful. Now give me money. That's what would have occurred if it had gone well. But because it did not go well, you know, the Ukraine authorities, according to the New York Times, they haven't formally announced anything. They're going to announce the start of the counteroffensive the minute they get some sort of successful breakthrough. That's when they're going to announce that it has officially started. Until they get a breakthrough, they're not going to say anything. The New York Times says that Ukraine did not give the U.S. a specific date of the counteroffensive. That is what the New York Times says in this article. The Ukraine military did not let the U.S. know the exact date when this counteroffensive will start, except for when Biden was at the G7 and he came out and publicly said, I know when the big counteroffensive will start. The New York Times seems to have forgotten the G7 meeting in Hiroshima and when Biden said, I know when the counteroffensive is going to begin. But according to the New York Times, the U.S. was not given a date as to when this counteroffensive was going to begin. If you believe that, then I've got a tree in Limassol to sell you, if you believe that one, from the New York Times. Let's see what else. Poroshenko, the former president, Chocolate King, Porky Poroshenko, he said the counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine will begin in the coming hours. This is what he said today. In the coming hours, it's going to begin, or yesterday. And he said that, this is in an interview with Corriere della Sera. He said that during the validity of the Minsk agreements, he, as president, managed to arm Ukraine. He called the Ukrainian army the best negotiator and said that the counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine will begin in the coming hours. Basically, Poroshenko said that negotiations will happen on the battlefield and not at the negotiating table. That is a statement from Poroshenko. And once again, Poroshenko has admitted for like the fifth time that the Minsk agreements were a charade, a lie, a farce, whatever you want to call it. It was just a way to buy time so that the collective West could arm and build up the Ukraine military. Now, from the big summer, spring, fall, winter, summer, fall counteroffensive, we have some more information from the Russian Ministry of Defense, and that is that in the South Donetsk region, 28 tanks were destroyed. That's just in South Donetsk. They also claim that 16 tanks were destroyed in the Zaporozhye region. That is quite a lot of tanks. We do have a lot of photo and video evidence of French AMX-10 light tanks destroyed. We do have that evidence. We also have some people claiming that Leopard tanks were not only taking part in this big counteroffensive, but that Leopard tanks were destroyed. I haven't seen any photos or videos of Leopard tanks abandoned or destroyed, but there are a lot of analysts claiming that Leopards were also destroyed. Either way, that is a lot of tanks for Ukraine to lose. And the French tanks, I think these are the wheeled tanks, they're not doing well at all. The New York Times, they ran an article yesterday with the title, Nazi Symbols on Ukraine's Front Lines Highlight Thorny Issue of History. Troops' use of patches bearing NAZI emblems risks fueling Russian propaganda and spreading imagery that the West has spent a half a century trying to eliminate. So this article that the New York Times published the other day, interesting timing for the New York Times to put this article out there. Anyway, they published this article trying to sanitize, to wash over the NAZI presence in Ukraine. And the source that they use to make the claim that, yes, Ukraine has an NAZI problem, but it's really not that much of a big deal. The source that they use to perform these mental gymnastics is Bellingcat. So the New York Times references Bellingcat to make the argument that, yes, Ukraine does have an NAZI problem, but it's not so bad. And actually, the New York Times makes the argument that the NAZI problem in Ukraine is a problem, but it's not as big a problem as the Russian problem. That is basically the argument that the New York Times makes. And in the article, they say that all the Ukraine photos and imagery, all the photos and imagery that come out of Ukraine showing the NAZI patches and tattoos and stuff like that, that just magically appear on the uniforms of Ukrainian soldiers, or magically are tattooed onto the skin of Ukrainian soldiers. They say that this imagery that keeps on popping up in photo after photo after photo highlights the Ukrainian military's complicated relationship with Nazi imagery, a relationship forged under both Soviet and German occupation during World War II. It's complicated. What's your relationship with the NAZIs? It's complicated. Doesn't Facebook have like a category, your relationship status, where you can choose it's complicated, like single, married, in a relationship, or it's complicated. It's complicated. You know how it is. You know how that NAZI stuff goes. It's all complicated stuff. The New York Times says that relationship, this complicated relationship, has become especially delicate because President Vladimir Putin of Russia has falsely declared Ukraine to be an NAZI state, a claim that he has used to justify his illegal invasion. So far, the imagery has not eroded international support for the war. It has, however, left diplomats, Western journalists, and advocacy groups in a difficult position, calling attention to the iconography risks playing into Russian propaganda. Saying nothing allows it to spread. So basically what the New York Times is saying, that a lot of diplomats in the West, they know Ukraine has an NAZI problem, they acknowledge it, but because they don't want to be labeled a Putin propagandist, a Kremlin stooge, they prefer to just not mention it at all. That's basically what the New York Times is saying here. They know Ukraine has this problem, but God forbid they highlight this problem, because if they highlight this problem, then you know what it means? It means that Putin was right. That's basically the mental gymnastics, the coping that we see going on here from the New York Times. They can't admit that there's this problem in Ukraine, because if they admit that there is this problem, then they basically admit that Putin was right when he said Ukraine has this problem, and they don't want to do that. I'll put an archive linked to this New York Times article down below. It's quite an incredible article. And before we get to our clown world, let's do a couple of quick stories. Here, one quick story that I want to talk about is that Ukraine is denying that Budanov has been killed. Kiev denies report intel chief is dead. Accounts of the death of Ukraine's military intelligence head, Kirill Budanov, are disinformation, according to Ukraine officials. The Center for Countering Disinformation, which is run by the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, said that all the reports about Budanov's alleged death are fakes, aiming at sowing panic among Ukrainians. The last time Budanov appeared in public was in a video published by the GUR on May 29th, a day before a Russian missile strike on Ukrainian decision-making centers. Since then, the GUR has published a written statement by Budanov on June 4th, but has not posted any official videos of him. Keep in mind, Budanov loved the media attention. He loved appearing on TV and making video statements. He was putting out videos almost every other day. And all of a sudden, poof, no more videos. The last time he appeared on video was on May 29th. Putin then gave an interview, and he said that the Russians are targeting decision-making centers, and we know that the Russians hit the GUR headquarters. And the only other indication that Budanov is still on this earth was some statement that came out on a Ukraine publication where allegedly Budanov said that Ukraine has captured Crimea psychologically. And capturing Crimea psychologically is better than actually capturing the real thing. But that was just a statement. That was a written statement. It wasn't a video. It wasn't anything like that. So if Budanov is around, I don't know, put out a video, show yourself. Put out a very strange, goofy video like what Zaluzhny put out, which has a lot of people now questioning what happened to Zaluzhny more than when people thought he had been injured or was in a hospital. That actually raised more questions, the video that he put out from a science fair in Odessa. A very odd video. But Budanov should put out a video. I think that's the best thing he can do. Slim Shady, please stand up. Show yourself, Budanov. And one more story is from the Gray Zone. And since we're talking about another type of Nord Stream ZNPP event taking place with the Kakhovka Dam, the Gray Zone put out an article about Nord Stream. And the Gray Zone participated, from what I understand, they participated in an independent expedition investigating the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. And near one of the blast sites, the Gray Zone discovered a diving boot used by U.S. Navy divers, something that Swedish investigators seemed to have missed. Independent Nord Stream expedition discovers clue missed by official investigators. That is from the Gray Zone. I'll put a link to this article from the Gray Zone. Who did it? Who did Nord Stream? I don't know. Maybe the same people that blew up the dam. I don't know. Just saying. I'm just saying. I don't know who did it. I'm just saying. Anyway, let's do a clown world. And you want to walk to the beach? Let's walk to the beach real quick. I think this is a long video. I apologize for that, but the dam, the blowing up of the dam was a big story. So let's do a quick clown world and we'll walk to the beach real quick. We'll walk around that way. And this clown world is from the CBC, coming out of Canada. And they put out an article with the title, "An Embarrassing Gear Shortage Has Canadian Troops in Latvia Buying Their Own Helmets." All right, so let's read this article as we go for a walk. I'll put a link to this article as well in the description box down below. This article was published on June the 5th. So yesterday, this article came out. And let's read what the CBC is telling us about Canada running out of gear, running out of weapons. I thought the Russians were running out of weapons. Oh, well. Oh, well, let's see here. There's a phrase soldiers use to describe equipment they've bought themselves to augment what the army gives them. They call it Gucci gear, after luxury fashion designer. Gucci gear, that is what they're calling it. How do I get to the beach area here? One sec. I think I know how. For Canadian troops deployed in Latvia, those private purchases have been decidedly more practical than luxurious, given the fact that they're taking part in more live-fire training exercises meant to deter Russia from setting foot in the Baltic country, right? Russia wants to set foot in Latvia. Man, I can't figure out, how do I get to the beach from here? I know I have to go this way. Let me see here. Let me cross over. Let me cross over here and try to figure this out. Stick with me. I'm going to finish this article. Stick with me, everybody. All right, I figured it out. All right. Let's see here. From Russia setting foot in the Baltic country. That is where I left off. Because Russia wants to invade Latvia. So that's why Canadian troops are there. They've been buying, the Canadian troops, they've been buying their own ballistics, helmets equipped with built-in hearing protection that doubles as a headset. They've also personally purchased rain gear and vests and belts to carry water and ammunition. And the number of complaints about the ill-fitting body armor issued to female soldiers has been growing. I thought Russia was running out of gear. How is this possible? Let's see here. These purchases, usually made through online retailers, involve brand name tactical gear or weapons accessories that make soldiers' existing gear more personal or more comfortable to wear. Canadian troops in Latvia are grappling with more urgent equipment shortages as well. Battle group of roughly 1,500 soldiers, including more than 700 Canadians, lacks modern anti-tank weapons, systems to counter drones, and a dedicated short-range air defense system to guard against helicopters and attack jets. These frustrations have only been compounded by the arrival of more Allied troops, among them Danish soldiers, who are in some cases arriving with Canadian purchase gear that makes them better equipped than Canadian soldiers. You understand that? So the Danish soldiers, they buy the gear from Canada, and they're better equipped than the Canadian soldiers in Latvia, who have to buy their own gear. Oh boy, that's a great clown world. Yeah, so much for who's the narrative about who's running out of weapons. It looks like the Canadian troops. They don't have anything, it seems. They don't have helmets. They don't have boots. They don't have anything. Man. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. TheDuran.locals.com. Look at that beautiful cactus. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute. Let's check out that cactus. Let's check out that cactus. Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rockfin, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code Good Day. Take care.